So this is the first video based on someone's recommendation, so I want to thank EY95 for asking I cover this tragedy. Several of you have asked me to make videos on certain events, and I'll work my way through these, as well as covering ones I think you'll find interesting. Also, thank you for supporting me on this channel so far. Marriage is a tradition which spans countries and cultures, with wedding days often being remembered as one of the greatest days of many people's lives, with hundreds, sometimes thousands of friends and family attending an event that represents two people committing their lives to each other. One such couple were Revan and Hanina Sho, who, at around 10:45 p.m. on the 26th of September 2023, began their first dance as man and wife, surrounded by indoor fireworks and in front of around 1,000 friends and family at their wedding in Iraq. This footage shows their final happy moments before their lives changed forever. What no one knew was the hall they were in was a death trap. It was overcrowded, there was not even basic safety equipment like fire extinguishers. Moments later, the pyrotechnic display set fire to decorations hanging from the ceiling, and within seconds, the hall was an inferno, leading to the roof collapsing, and over 100 guests losing their lives. Welcome to Tales of Tragedy. For today's tale, we go back less than a year to September 2023 and travel to Iraq, which is situated in the Middle East, with our focus being the town of Qaraqosh, which lies in the north of the country. Qaraqosh has been referred to as Iraq's Christian capital due to its residents being almost entirely followers of the Catholic faith, with the Pope visiting the area in 2021. Residents of this town, like many of the 44 million people who live in Iraq, have had to deal with dictatorship, war, and extremism over the last 2 decades. In 2014, ISIS took over Qaraqosh, and the 50,000 residents were forced to flee. Unfortunately, not all of them escaped, and some were murdered by Islamic extremists. When the town was liberated in 2016, around half of the residents returned and tried to rebuild their lives, and the town itself, although much of the town remains in ruins almost 10 years later. However, there's a more insidious issue in Iraq that still remains, and that is systematic corruption in every level of government. The turmoil in Iraq has allowed organised crime groups to exert control over every facet of life within the country. Officials are bought and sold regularly, resulting in often dangerous building projects being greenlit and safety procedures being completely ignored, all to maximise profits. It's estimated that corruption cost the Iraqi government around $600 billion between 2003 and the mid-2020s. This greed has resulted in several terrible tragedies in Iraq in recent years. On the 21st of March 2019, 103 people died when a ferry carrying passengers on the Tigris River capsized. The ferry was carrying 200 people, 4 times the maximum capacity, and there were no life jackets on board. The water level of the Tigris was particularly high, and there were strong currents, so the crossing was particularly perilous, but the ferry owners continued operations to maximise profits to pay themselves, corrupt government officials, and protection money to organised crime figures. In April 2021, a fire broke out at the Ibn al-Khatib hospital in the capital Baghdad after oxygen tanks meant for COVID patients exploded. The hospital had no smoke detectors, sprinkler system, or fire hoses. Ceiling tiles throughout the hospital were flammable and chosen because they were cheap. This caused the fire to spread quickly, leading to the wards being turned into an inferno, claiming the lives of 82 people. Another dangerous structure was the Al Hatham Banquet Hall in Qaraqosh. This outwardly elegant venue was a death trap. It was built using the cheapest materials. The ceiling was made using sandwich panels, in this case 2 pieces of vinyl with a piece of fabric in between. If fire was to melt the vinyl, then it would have an abundance of flammable material to feed the flames, which would not only result in toxic fumes filling the air, but also there was the real possibility of the ceiling collapsing. This was the same type of material that allowed the Grenfell fire in London in 2017 to spread so quickly and claim the lives of 72 people. In addition, there were not even basic safety measures in the hall. There were no sprinklers or fire extinguishers. There were also few exits to the venue, and these were small, meaning there was a significant risk of a crush in an emergency. The venue had a capacity of around 500 people, but to maximise profits, it regularly held events for more than 1,000 people. In the case of weddings, which is relevant to this disaster, hundreds of tables covered in flammable tablecloths were often placed close together to allow as many guests as possible to attend, and flammable decorations were draped over the chandelier and hung from the ceiling. The hall had been in operation for a number of years, despite it being unlicensed. In the months before the tragedy, the venue had been cited for safety violations, but the mayor of Qaraqosh had given permission for it to continue to operate. This appears in part because the owners were leaders in a state security service known as Iraq's Popular Mobilization Forces. The tragedy was inevitable, and on the evening of the 26th of September 2023, almost 1,000 people were packed into the hall. Over 100 of them would not leave alive and would suffer a terrifying and horrific death. On the evening of Tuesday the 26th of September 2023, around 1,000 guests were packed into the Al Hatham banquet hall, which was around twice its maximum capacity. They were there to celebrate the marriage of 27-year-old Reverend Isho and his 18-year-old bride Haneen. The guests were sat around tables covered with flammable tablecloths, and decorations were hung from the ceiling. All that was needed was a spark to set the whole place alight, and this was provided by indoor fireworks that surrounded the dance floor, where at 10:45 p.m. the couple began their first dance as man and wife. Indoor pyrotechnics are extremely dangerous and need to be installed and operated by specially trained engineers who have undertaken a proper risk assessment. The fireworks in this case were apparently just set up by workers at the venue who had no idea what they were doing. The horror that unfolded was all caught on camera. Within seconds, you can see the decorations catch fire and the flames quickly beginning to spread. For a few brief seconds, no one appears to have spotted this, but quickly, both bride and groom noticed the catastrophe unfolding around them. Within seconds, the fire consumed the decorations and began to burn through the ceiling, consuming the flammable fabric contained within the panels. Burning parts of ceiling and decorations began falling, setting fire to the tablecloths on the table. Eyewitnesses said that from the point of the ignition, the fire consumed the decorations and the ceiling within approximately 3 seconds. Believing that the fire was caused by the electrics, power was cut to the venue, plunging it into darkness, leading to a frantic stampede for the few exits, with men, women and children scrabbling about in the dark, their lungs being filled with toxic smoke and flames all around them. The ceiling then gave way and collapsed, trapping hundreds of people in the debris. It took less than 4 minutes from the start of the fire to the banquet hall being turned into a blazing inferno. Most of the guests were eventually able to climb out of the ruins of the hall, but 107 people were killed as a result of being burnt to death, dying from smoke inhalation, being crushed by the collapse of the hall, or being trampled to death. 27 of the dead were children under the age of 12, with the youngest victim being just 8 months old. Most of the bodies were pulled from the wreckage of the hall, and many of them were so badly burnt they could only be identified through dental records. 82 guests were seriously injured, some of them receiving third-degree burns. The bride and groom, Reverend and Haneen Isho, survived, but their lives were destroyed. They both lost many members of their family. Reverend lost 15 members of his family, and Haneen lost 10 of hers, including her mother and brother. The trauma of what happened meant that Haneen stopped speaking, and I want to play a short clip of an interview with them. Whilst Reverend is talking, I want you to look at Haneen. I don't think I've ever seen a video of a woman who's more broken than she is.
I grabbed my wife and I began to drag her. I kept dragging her and trying to get her out of the kitchen entrance. As people were fleeing, they were trampling on her. Her legs are injured. That's it, we can't live here anymore. We can't live here anymore. I mean, every time we try to have some happiness, something tragic happens to us and destroys the happiness. So it's best for us to leave. She's lost 10 relatives from her family, her loved ones, her mum, her brother. She can't speak. It's true, we're sitting here in front of you alive, but inside, we're dead. We are numb. We're dead inside.
The Prime Minister of Iraq, Mohammed Shia al-Sudani, declared 3 days of national mourning in the aftermath of the tragedy. He also visited the site 2 days later to meet the grieving families and to promise the establishment of an investigative committee to get to the root cause of the fire. In the short term, all relevant authorities were ordered to improve building safety across the country by undertaking random inspections of various venues and shutting down those which were found to be unsafe. However, this meant nothing to the relatives and friends of those who died. The grief these people felt, and will likely feel for the rest of their lives, was etched on their faces as they buried men, women, and children whose lives had come to such a tragic end on a day that should have been one of celebration. A month after the fire, the committee set up by the Prime Minister to investigate the tragedy released their initial findings. They stated the primary cause of the fire was the use of indoor pyrotechnics. However, it was the staggering number of issues in the banquet hall, including use of flammable material in its construction, overcrowding on the day of the incident, and lack of any fire safety measures, which had been the reason why so many lives had been lost. It's indicated in various reports that between 10 and 15 people were arrested by Iraqi security forces in the aftermath of the tragedy. This included the mayor of Qaraqosh, the owners of the hall, workers who set up the fireworks, as well as local officials. A recommendation was made for the formation of specialised committees to ensure that those responsible were referred to the judiciary for formal charges, but at the time of recording, almost a year later, there are no indicators that anyone has appeared in court for their role in this disaster. Given the level of corruption in the country, it's unlikely, until this is stamped out, that anyone will actually be held accountable for the 107 lives that were lost, and it will only be a matter of time until more innocent people die in another tragedy in Iraq, because there, and unfortunately all over the world, money is more important than human life. Thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Also, feel free to check out my second channel called Evil Among Us, which focuses on true crime. I'll put a link in the description. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.